The quadratic equation of x3 is... Oh, hello there, team. I didn't see you. Today we're going to talk about dominance and restoration in regards to tanks and healers, because there's been some questions and a lot of newer players don't really understand the concept because some of the senior players tell them things and they don't understand. So what we're going to do is just talk about the basics. First of all, if you ever hear anything in this game that hasn't officially been put out, just assume it's a rumor. Most of the things that go on in this game you can read about in the forums or right here on the game, like I'm about to show you. Alright, before we talk about the Dom and Resto, I'm going to talk a little bit about Aggro. A lot of folks like to say that dominance pulls aggro, but that is just not true. If anybody says that, they're wrong, and I'm going to prove it to you right now. Let me ask you a question. If you're a healer and you've been in an instance with controllers or tanks, have you ever gotten attacked? Probably so. Do healers have dominance? No, they don't. Healers do not have dominance. Even if you spec into dominance, you're not even going to come close to the amount of dominance that a controller and a tank has. So let's just nerf that right now and take it off the table. Because it really... oh wait, I did the wrong one. Hang on. Gotta wait for it to cool down. But it's just ridiculous. It's the most ridiculous thing. I'm going to show you what pulls aggro in just a second here. But that rumor right there really makes me angry. I'm the bulk. Not the Hulk, because this is DC. Alright, so let me show you what pulls aggro. I'm going to go into, this is my tank. It's my third alt. Okay, powers, storms. Every tank power is going to sound something like this. In tank roll, all damage you cause is penalized by 20%, while dominance is increased by 100%. We're going to talk about that in a moment also. Using storm powers increases your defense and toughness by 90% and will attract enemies' attention to you, causing them to attack you rather than allies. Finally, you gain +3 perception, improving your chances of detecting stealth using enemies. Alright. So when you use a power and tank stance against an enemy, and if you hit them with that harmful superpower, it's going to pull aggro on it because you're a tank. And it's going to pull aggro away from your allies. Generally speaking, if a tank is doing their job and people in the raid are still getting hit, it's a few things. One, they might be too close to the boss and they're getting hit with AoE. Two, there are specific moves designed to pull aggro off of the tank and attack non-tank players in the raid. So if you get hit by a move and you're like, oh, tank lost aggro, he's gonna kill me. The tank didn't lose aggro, because if he did, you'd be dead already. Because if it was a hit that was designed for the tank, it would have killed you. Alright, so that's done. The Dom does not pull aggro. Alright, the 100%, okay, well actually let's talk about that in a moment. Let's go into the stats and read what it says for dominance. Dominance increases the potency of certain defensive and healing abilities and the duration of certain control effects, stun, roots, levitations, and encasements from powers. At high levels, dominance must be higher than enemy willpower to be effective. Alright, so the real purpose of dominance, because controllers and tanks have them, is to control your enemies. It does certain control effects, things that controllers and tanks do. Levitations, encasements, stuns, roots. So if you're juggling enemies as a tank, for example, ice, which most people are ice right now, you hit bitter winds. The reason that the enemies fly up in the air is because your dominance is higher than their willpower. So that's the main thing of dominance. Now, dominance also increases the potency of certain defensive and healing abilities. So what does that mean? Tanks use the tank shields are a healing style shield. So there is a formula. You add dominance and restoration a certain way, and that's going to determine how great your shields are. Now here's the thing. As we looked earlier, tanks get 100% increase in dominance. Meaning, a lot of people don't realize this. My true dominance is half of this. If I switch to DPS stance with all this gear and spec to this loadout, look at what happens to my dominance. It gets cut in half. Okay? So that's why as a healer, you wouldn't want to spec into dominance unless you have a ridiculous amount of skill points. because it's not going to be as effective. Restoration is going to be more potent, and also if you're a healer, you definitely want to be spec'd into critical healing, all the critical healing. All right, so that kind of explains dominance and resto. If you go to restoration, it also tells you restoration increases healing and increases the potency of certain defensive abilities. For restoration equals 1% base healing. All right, so restoration increases the potency of certain defensive abilities. Since tanks have healer type shields, healing type shields, excuse me, then restoration is going to increase your defensive ability. But because you get that 100% increase in Dom, of course you want to spec into Dom first. I think this tank is my alt. I have, all right, so on the head and the shoulders there, you can see it's a red socket. For this tier of gear, you actually wouldn't even want to spec into dominance and might if you were trying to be a full tank. It would be more effective to spec into dominance and health because you would get more health off of a mod and the affinity bonus. For example, there you go. You get 95 health off of a dominance and health mod versus 49 health off of that affinity bonus. But I like to get that fake damage, so there you go. I have a little extra might. But let's see, where is it? Dominance and power. There you go. All right, so some tanks will do this. They'll spec into some of their yellow sockets, restoration and health instead of power and health or power and dom. So that's kind of one thing that they do to increase their shield's effectiveness. Fire tanks, of course, are going to want to spec into restoration because they're a self-healing tank. When I was a fire tank, I had to stop tanking with fire because it was just becoming a pain in the butt in Nexus and Paradox. But when I was a fire tank, I generally healed myself for 25% of my damage in, just because I knew how to fire tank pretty well. All right. So basically, restoration and dominance work together, but if you're a tank, you want to have dominance first because you get an increase in dominance, and then if you're a healer, you want to have resto first. I think I pretty much covered everything. Let me look at my notes here. Okay. One last thing. What pulls aggro? It's been addressed in the forums. Generally, when you use superpowers, they pull aggro for the most part. Obviously, you can pull aggro with a weapon, but when it comes down to it, think about this. Have you ever been in an instance with an electric healer? We all know electric healers use a lot of power. I used to be electric up until about CR 97 on my healer, and it just became too much power usage to solo heal. So that's generally, if you're not a tank, generally superpowers are going to pull aggro. If you have any questions about that, I advise that you go into the DC Universe Online forums. There's a lot of great stuff in there, and the devs are pretty good about answering questions. So if you have any questions about this video, just ask below. Other than that, let me go back into this forum. Bruce Banner, or actually Bruce Banner, so we don't want to do any copyright infringement on Marvel. All right, thanks a lot.